well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, and I am glad that you are with us on the program today. In this, we're still in, election limbo, still waiting to see how the 2020 presidential election is going to end up. We do have a little bit of news out of the U.S. Senate, though. Reported on this morning at bearingarms.com. Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, saying that he will not be the 50th vote to remove the filibuster in the Senate and to pack the Supreme Court. That puts a lot of pressure, by the way, on Joe Manchin, by the way, among his fellow Democrats who, there's this war going on. I mean, we're seeing in the post-election environment splits on the right and on the left. I think there are deeper splits on the left right now, quite frankly, between, the quote-unquote moderates like Joe Manchin or Connor Lamb, who was complaining about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Abigail Spanberger. And then you got the squad. You got the socialist wing of the Democrat Party. I think that those divisions are actually deeper than what you're seeing right now among compared to the folks on the right, the Trump supporters, the never Trumpers, the anti-Trumpers. I know I can't keep track of any of this stuff, but I am kind of fascinated to see how this is playing out, particularly on the left. Because that is where the energy for gun control comes these days, right? It's not coming from the right. So you look at the split on the left right now, not only in terms of are we going to, go full bore with a democratic socialist agenda, or are we going to try to present a more moderate front for the next couple of years so that Democrats don't get their rear end sanded to them in the midterms. While all of that is playing out, we're obviously watching what this means for gun control. If Joe Manchin is not going to go along with removing the filibuster, that means that Democrats can't pack the court. He would not be they would need every Democrat to sign on in order to have the votes to change the rules. And Manchin says he's not going to do it. Now, I'll be curious. We talked about this during our reporting this morning. I'll be curious to see if Joe Manchin doesn't actually end up as a member of the Republican Party here in the next couple of months, but he's certainly going to be a thorn in the side of Democrats who are hoping to advance this anti-gun legislative agenda. I'm not saying that it is out of the question. I don't necessarily trust Joe Manchin, to be perfectly honest with you, but that is what he is saying right now. And while it looks like, again, the Senate and the House are going to be very closely divided, which is good news for gun owners in terms of being able to stop Joe Biden's legislative agenda, we certainly know that Biden is going to be using, if he does get elected president and is sworn in, we know that he is going to be using the power of the executive branch to promulgate policies, executive actions, regulations through ATF, the Treasury Department, to go after gun owners, firearms manufacturers, to do basically everything that he can within the executive branch to curtail our Second Amendment rights. One of the things that Biden had talked about was looking at strategies to, get involved at the local level. And there's really nothing objectionable about some of the things that he's calling for, grants to address community anti-violence programs and things of that nature. This is part of the split, actually, that's happening on the left. We've talked about this over the past few months, where there is a portion of the Democratic Party, and it's actually sort of the far left portion of the Democratic Party, the anti-police faction within the Democratic Party, who is not as amenable to the old school gun control proposals as folks like Joe Biden, because these old school gun control proposals rely on police to actually enforce these gun control laws. This is going to be a big topic on the left, I think. I mean, it may fly under the radar. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of media reporting, but folks are already talking about this. As a matter of fact, there was a report that came out just a couple of days ago from the John Jay College Research Advisory Group on Preventing and Reducing Community Violence. Reducing Violence Without Police, a review of research evidence. Now, I got to tell you, I was kind of excited when I saw this. I thought, oh, good. Maybe they're starting to really take this idea seriously of, these gun control laws that end up putting people in prison for nonviolent, possessory offenses. Maybe that's not the way to go. And then I actually read the report, or at least I read a portion of the report. And there are, page after page of material dealing with programs that have been successful in reducing violent crime that do not involve law enforcement, that don't involve the typical gun control laws. But then you get to this section. Confront the gun problem. Yes, implementing comprehensive and uniform gun policies can decrease the use of firearms in violent acts. Violence has been reduced by policy mechanisms that limit access to guns and increase restrictions for individuals with violent crime backgrounds, reduce access to guns by young people, impose waiting periods, and increase required training. All right, so in a report that, again, is all about reducing violence without involving the police, yeah, they're actually involving the police. Now, they have a laundry list of items here, so long I couldn't even fit them all in one page, but look at this. Confront the gun problem. Here are their proposals. Tell me how many of these proposals actually involve law enforcement. In a report that's all about reducing violence without involving law enforcement. Prohibit people with previous convictions for domestic violence charges from possessing or purchasing firearms. Well, that's actually already the law. Enact child access prevention laws. In other words, storage laws. Okay, well, how do those laws get enforced, if not by law enforcement? Reduce firearm availability for individuals with documented histories of interpersonal violence. That, again, sounds like you're going to be involving law enforcement, right? Either somebody's a prohibited person, they've been convicted of a felony or domestic violence misdemeanor, or they've been adjudicated mentally defective, or it could be that gun control activists are talking about red flag laws, which also, again, involve law enforcement coming to your home to take your firearms. In a report that is all about the police not being involved here, every one of these agenda items so far has involved police. Implement handgun purchaser licensing laws. Okay, that too is going to involve the police because the issuing authority in most jurisdictions, either your county sheriff or your local police. As a matter of fact, in Massachusetts, and I bring up Massachusetts because Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's buddy in Congress, representative from Massachusetts, she introduced legislation last year. It didn't go anywhere, but she introduced legislation, and it kind of was picked up actually by the Biden campaign. You can find a version of this in his campaign materials on the gun safety page, where she wanted to give federal grant money to states that would implement Massachusetts-style gun licensing laws. The problem is, well, there are a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems with this proposal is that in Massachusetts, and I'm talking about one of the biggest problems from the left's perspective, not even from gun owners' perspectives, but one of the biggest problems with this proposal from the left's perspective is that in Massachusetts, it's up to the local police chief to decide if you are suitable to own a firearm, if you are suitable to get a gun license. So you can pass a background check. You can meet all of the statutory requirements. And the police chief can just decide, yeah, you know what? I'm just getting a bad feeling about you. They don't have to have any specific reason whatsoever to deny you. They have that leeway to deny you for any reason or no reason whatsoever. Now, again, you want to talk about reducing violence without getting law enforcement involved? Well, that would preclude establishing these types of handgun purchaser laws that would prohibit the average citizen from exercising their Second Amendment rights. All right, let's go back to the list here. Remove stand your ground laws. Yeah, the gun control groups believe that to stand your ground, actually creates violent crime. It does not. Homicides in the state of Florida, where stand your ground first introduced, have actually continued to decline. Violent crime overall has continued to decline after stand your ground laws were put on the books. But again, they're looking for ways to target legal gun owners and to, quite frankly, make it more difficult to act in self-defense. They also want to add waiting periods for purchasing firearms. Yeah. They also talk about implement mandated reporting of lost or stolen firearms. Again, this is a law that would be enforced by law enforcement. Utilize strong regulation and oversight of license. Oh, I missed one. Extend background check requirements to private transfers. Okay, again, you're getting law enforcement involved. Who polices the background checks? By the way, there is no way to proactively enforce a universal background check law. There's just not. It's easy, and I don't think a lot of non-gun owners understand this. Hey, well, why shouldn't you have a background check on every gun sale? Well, again, how do you make sure that happens? I mean, it's one thing to police a gun store, somebody who is in the business of selling firearms, right? The ATF can go in, they can look at their books, they can conduct an audit. If police get a tip that guns are being sold, off the books, under the table, without background checks being performed, they could go and investigate. How do you stop a neighbor selling a firearm to a neighbor without going through a background check? How do you stop that? How do you prevent that? How does a universal background check law prevent that from happening? It doesn't, which is why Washington State, which passed universal background checks in 2016, has seen just a handful of prosecutions. New Mexico, which passed universal background checks in 2018, has yet to see a prosecution. Virginia, which imposed universal background checks earlier this year, has yet to see an arrest or a prosecution. These things don't actually do anything to reduce violent crime. They're completely unenforceable from a proactive standpoint. At best, they're a charge that could be filed after a gun was used in a crime and arrest has been made. You say, well, how'd you get the gun? Well, my neighbor sold it to me. Did you go through a background check? Nah, he just, sold it to me. It's silly. But again, it also still involves law enforcement. Utilize strong regulation and oversight of licensed gun sellers, also involving law enforcement, and maintain no issue or may issue laws rather than shall issue laws. And again, we go back to the idea of the subjective standards that law enforcement have in some states like Massachusetts or California or New York, Maryland, New Jersey. There's really only about 8 states left that are may issue when it comes to the right to carry. There are twice as many states that are constitutional carry as there are may issue states. But again, we're involving law enforcement. And not only, by the way, are we involving law enforcement at the front end in terms of, having the discretion to deny the average citizen their right to bear arms. But of course, law enforcement's involved on the back end as well. In New York City, for example, about 70% of the cases in Brooklyn's gun court are charges of carrying a firearm without a license. And the average New York resident can't get a license to carry. So New York, again, a may issue state, and it's more of a no issue city in a may issue state. And to the gun control groups, they say that's great, right? The folks compiling this report, we need more of that. Do you? Because again, how do those may issue or no issue laws get enforced when somebody is caught carrying a firearm without a license? It's the cops, and then it's the courts. And in New York City, it's a 3.5-year prison sentence for the nonviolent possessory offense of carrying a firearm without a license that the average citizen cannot obtain. So again, I go back to the title of this report, Reducing Violence Without Police. And they do offer a lot of strategies, but they completely undercut the intention of their report with their section on dealing with guns. Because all of a sudden, they've found a lot of room for police to maneuver. They found a lot of space for law enforcement to be involved, including arresting and putting people in prison for something that is protected by the Second Amendment, keeping and bearing arms. Again, I was hopeful when I saw this report. I thought, wait, maybe, you know what? Maybe we're turning the corner here. But the gun control crowd, as much as they acknowledge, okay, you know what? Among our base on the left, police aren't seen as protectors of the community. They're seen as a force that needs to be curtailed. And so we got to look for ways to reduce violent crime without involving the police. Even with that mindset, they can't break away from the traditional gun control models of reducing legal gun ownership and enforcing those restrictions that reduce legal gun ownership by police officers, both local, state, and federal law enforcement. That ultimately is going to be a continued problem as we talk again about the split on the left. This is a divide, I think, even among some in the, let's call it the gun violence prevention community. Well, I won't even call it the gun control movement. I'll call it the gun violence prevention community, because there are still some voices out there who say, listen, no. Anything that's going to result in, mass criminalization or mass imprisonment, mass incarceration, we're not on board with that. Let's look at these, violence interrupters. Let's look at these programs that try to turn people away from violent crime as opposed to imposing new restrictions on people owning firearms. Now, admittedly, that's a pretty small voice right now in the gun violence prevention community. But the fact that this report, again, all about ways to reduce violent crime without getting police involved, ultimately involves a lot of law enforcement. So I would tell the academics involved in this project at John Jay College, back to the drawing board, because the headline of your report certainly does not really look like what's actually contained within. All right, on to our good deed of the day, our armed citizen story, our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Maryland where an 18-year-old convicted in Annapolis in a shooting managed to avoid a 20-year prison sentence. Yeah, thanks to a nice judge. It's from the Capital Gazette. Circuit Judge Pamela Albin in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, handed down a sentence of 20 years in prison for Jareek James Downs, stemming from a double shooting in Annapolis. But then she turned around and suspended all but 18 months of that 20-year prison sentence and ordered the young man to serve his time at the Anne Arundel County Detention Center as opposed to the state prison. She said that she was giving Downs a chance to realize his potential, but wouldn't hesitate to lock him up if he balks at the terms of his 5 years of probation. Yeah, if he does, she said, she would impose the remainder of time behind bars. He said, you have so much promise. I want that promise to come to life. This is your one and last shot to stay away from the prison system. She waived his court fee, saying, I don't want your money. I want you to get your life and act together. This is actually a gift under the facts of this case. Hell yeah, it is. The question is whether or not Downs actually deserved that present. He entered an Alford plea back in October to second-degree assault, reckless endangerment, being a minor in possession of a firearm. Originally charged with attempted murder, among other felony offenses. That Alford plea indicates that Downs acknowledged prosecutors had enough evidence to convict him in a trial, but he still maintains his innocence. State Attorney's Office said the two victims of the case had refused to participate in proceedings, which was a problem. Without witnesses, it's kind of hard to build a case, and that is probably a big reason why a plea deal was offered to Downs in the first place. But one of the victims actually came forward at the last minute. According to the Capital Gazette, Jamar Howard spoke not only to prosecutors but to a Downs attorney, Kathleen Kircher, after reading about Downs' plea. For days after Downs accepted a prosecutor's offer, the man who prosecutors said refused to come to court wanted to say something. He submitted an affidavit saying he wasn't sure who shot him, but he was certain that it wasn't Downs. And then the defense attorney filed papers to withdraw Downs' plea. That motion, however, made moot after a conversation between the defense attorney, Downs, and his mother. The attorney declined to comment on the affidavit, but said that, quote, I'm relieved of the outcome because too often we throw away potential. And that didn't happen in this case. Yeah. You know, listen, I hope that Mr. Downs takes advantage of this gift. I really do. Even the judge, I think, ultimately believes that Downs deserved some actual punishment. She said, "I think you deserved more than 18 months, but I'm not sending you to the big jail." Well, again, that slap on the wrist, hopefully enough to turn the life of Jerick James Downs around. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not confident in the outcome here. And it should be noted that a guy who was once accused of attempted murder is going to do less time behind bars than somebody who could just be caught in possession of a firearm without a license in the state of Maryland. Now, maybe that person, that hypothetical individual, maybe they'd get a plea bargain too, but on paper, Downs got less time behind bars than he would have been eligible for had he simply been caught carrying a firearm without a license. So maybe rather than, a criminal justice system that reduces all of these charges down to nothingness for violent criminals, maybe we need a criminal justice system that actually focuses on the violent criminals and gets rid of some of the BS nonviolent possessory firearm offenses that are on the books. Just saying. All right, today's armed citizen story from the Lone Star State of Texas, where an accused burglar shot by a resident in Weslaco, Texas. Sheriff's office responded to a location in rural Weslaco just before 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon on a call of a burglary with a habitation, or burglary of a habitation. According to the Monitor newspaper, the sheriff's deputies met with the victim, who stated that 2 armed men wearing black masks entered his residence without permission. The victim discharged his firearm, believed he struck one of the suspects. Both suspects then quickly fled the location in a red vehicle. Not long after, the Weslaco Police Department found the wounded suspect in his vehicle at a local hospital. 33-year-old Aiden Izaguirre later died of the gunshot wound. The other masked suspect remains at large at this point. Sheriff's release says that the investigators are currently working to identify the other parties involved. But right now, they don't have any idea who that might be. The homeowner not facing any charges, of course, because he was acting in self-defense inside his own domicile. So we'll keep an eye on any updates out of that story from rural Weslaco County, Texas, and give you any updates as they become available. Finally, our good deed of the day from just down the road, from me anyway, in Farmville, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, where a Richmond police officer saved a woman from a suicide attempt just a couple of days ago. This is a heartbreaking story, and I'm so glad it has a happy ending. It was November the 3rd. Jason Jones, who's a officer in the 1st Precinct, and several other officers responded for a report of a suicidal woman who was threatening to set herself on fire. When Officer Jones arrived on the scene, he found the woman standing there on the sidewalk next to a plastic milk container filled with gasoline. Woman reeked of gas. She said that she had just poured gas on herself, clothes dripping wet. She held a lighter in her hand. Officer Jones then directed other officers to block traffic and stand by with fire extinguishers. And he started talking to her. He just started talking to her. Used crisis intervention training tactics, eventually convinced the woman to drop the lighter. She was taken to a local hospital to get mental health treatment. Richmond Police Department on their Facebook page said the quick and effective actions taken by Officer Jones undoubtedly contributed to saving this woman's life. Outstanding work. We are so proud of you, and so proud that you are part of the Richmond Police Department family. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Officer Jason Jones, we thank you for your very, very good deed. And I do just want to note that if you are struggling right now, or if you know somebody who's struggling right now, and I know that a lot of folks are, please don't give up. Somebody cares about you more than you know, probably. And if you need somebody to talk to, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. Again, that is 1-800-273-8255. If you need that number or somebody you know needs that number, please make sure they call. Please make sure that that they get the help, that you get the help that you need, because as crazy as the world is right now, their life is still worth living. I promise you that. And there are better days ahead. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company, but I do want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be doing our weekly live chat with Mr. Ed Worsey of Hot Air for our VIP Gold members. You can sign up and be a part of that at bearingarms.com. You can also subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you'll never miss one of these programs. Or if you like the podcast version, you can just go to Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. You can find us there as well. Thank you again for all of your support. Thanks for being a part of the program today. And we'll see you back here tomorrow with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Until then, be safe, be well, and be free.